We know that our connections, people who are connected are happier and live longer. And our connections are also, people who are connected to each other in their community are also connected to job opportunities, to collective problem solving, to opportunities just to be, fulfilled as a person living in that community. So we really can't afford for social connection to just be a part of the background of our lives, to just be something that we don't put a lot of thought into. And so today, I think we have two really great panelists who are going to share with us just some of the habits and the structures that they've put in their lives, and some of the habits and structures of their communities that build connection as well. And so really looking forward to that discussion. Just for some quick, this is the one touch of data that I'm going to give today, I promise. Just how do we do in Nebraska as far as social connection goes? All the latest index data shows that 88% of Nebraskans are getting together with family and friends at least once a week, which puts us at 10th in the nation. So that's pretty good news. And good news also is that we get together with neighbors frequently, 5th in the nation. About 40% of people getting together with neighbors at least once a week. You'll see a couple of other metrics there. Of doing favors for neighbors, helping out with family and friends. And even though those look low, under 10%, the people who do that at least occasionally is closer to about half. So it's not quite as bleak of numbers as it seems. But really, we have more breakdown on those numbers and how it plays out across incomes and age groups, but it just seemed a little bit cold to dwell there too much, and people are warm. So we wanted to dig into stories today. Some of the priorities from the index that came out that we were wanting to cover are going to be the infrastructure of connection, the events, associations, and places where people connect, and also focusing on our connectors and includers, two of whom we have with us today. So one of the things that came out of the discussions for the Civic Health Index was the formal and informal leaders, and connecting people who connect networks within the community. So with that, we're going to pair off. That's as much data as you're getting today. And we're interested in starting us to get warmed up just by asking about the strengths in social connection in your community, and why that strength is important in the life of your community. So please take this opportunity to connect with somebody maybe in a different part of the state. We're going to pair you off for just about 5 minutes. So introduce yourself, share a strength of connection in your community and why it's important, and then we'll see you all back here and dig into our discussion. So with that, Amanda, are we ready to go?
Just about. I am finishing all the rooms. All right, off you go.
All right, welcome back, everybody. Welcome back to me as well. That was nice to get to chat. Does anybody volunteer to step into space here and share either something that came to mind for you or something that you heard that you would think is worth sharing to the group?
This is Beth from Diller. Ebony and I had a delightful conversation, and I'm envious of her position and the State Board of Education. We had a good laugh because I said I'm from a small community where everyone knows you and everything about you. They also know everything about your parents and grandparents. That can be a wonderful connection. It can also be a very difficult stepping stone. But then I said, you also, depending on the culture of the community, when someone new comes in, they'll meet you on the street and the residents will give you a stare glare, and then they will immediately walk quickly to somebody they know and ask who you are. And I said that's one of the the cultural things I would love to see change a bit is just teach open welcomeness. But yeah, we had a good laugh about the rural community stare glare. So
yeah, thanks for sharing that. Yeah, Christine in our conversation shared about how her church has created some connection through a project with Habitat for Humanity, and it's led to getting connected with a school that they weren't previously connected with, and connection among their members, and doing some good locally. So that was great to hear too.
I'll just chime in since it kind of ties into what Beth just said. In our conversation, we talked a little bit about ways that we could strengthen our social connectedness through volunteer opportunities and organizations. And but how I was talking about, because I was looking at your numbers about how much we help our neighbors and everything here in Nebraska. And for a while, we lived in Tennessee for 4 years. And it was remarkable to me, and it was almost alarming when I first went there, because people are so friendly to strangers and to each other. And you can go into a grocery store and people will want to know your whole life story. Complete strangers will have a complete conversation with you about anything and everything under the sun. And they genuinely are interested. And it happened all the time. And then people I didn't know were always doing things for me and bringing things to me and offering to do this. And the neighborliness was so different. And it was, it was a little bit uncomfortable at first, but then I came to love it. And then when we came back here, I really miss it, because people are more standoffish and aren't as good at doing the things one-on-one, especially with strangers. And so we just talked a little bit about how different it is just within the United States and depending upon the culture of the area you're in.
Yeah, great. Well, thanks for sharing that. We're going to jump into our panel discussion right now. If you have anything else that you'd like to share, feel free to drop it in the chat. Would love to hear what else people have going on, what strengths their communities have. So please, you're welcome to drop that in the chat if you'd like. But we're going to introduce our panelists, Brian Seck and Beth Rolfs. Brian, Amanda, as I was trying to get the scoop on Brian before, described him as a force of nature in Lincoln. So no pressure to live up to that, to that name, Brian. But anyway, Brian formerly works in workforce development, but also serves on a homelessness coalition, a number of advisory boards, including the Child Advocacy Center and the Nonprofit Hub. And also, as Amanda mentioned, he and his wife, Janelle, have a consulting company where they help nonprofits, including Civic, Nebraska, develop strategic plans. And he also recently welcomed a little girl into their family. So welcome, Brian. And then Beth, we got acquainted, it was at a conference, and then they invited us down to just come and look around and get a sense for how Diller does civic health well. And we came down and we had some homemade sausage from right there in Diller and some cheese. And we talked about all the great things they have going on, including their over 120-year-old community picnic, which has over 175 volunteers. This is in a town of 270 people. They have a full downtown youth philanthropy program, just a lot of really amazing stuff. And so I think Brian and Beth, welcome. And we're excited to hear about how you cultivate connection in your towns. So first, I guess, Brian, I'll start with you if you don't mind. Just if you could give us a brief description of what you consider to be your community and your work. And that could be either however you take that to be, your paid gig or your work as a community member.
Yeah, so first, thanks for having me. I see a lot of people that I've had the opportunity to work with over the years. So thanks for putting up with me. And for those of you who I haven't worked with yet, I hope to have the opportunity to in the future, whether it's in Lincoln or some kind of statewide initiative. So I moved here from Brooklyn in New York in 2011. So when we're talking about friendliness, the East Coast is another animal compared to the Midwest, where here I was like, why is everyone talking to me? I don't know you. Do not say hi to me. Do not make eye contact with me. Do not acknowledge my existence. What is wrong with you people? It took me years. It took me years to think I didn't look like Tom Cruise to everyone or Brad Pitt. It took me years to figure that out. I want you guys all to know that. That's what the Midwest did to me, is it made my ego go way up. And Laura Uradil is like, that's not possible. I want everyone to know that's what Laura thinks. So in all seriousness, when I think about like, what is my community, my cornerstone belief is equity. And given the opportunity, everyone can be as successful as they want to be. Success is whatever you want it to be, right? So I served as the homeless outreach specialist for Lincoln Public Schools for about 3 years. LPS has about 500 students who become homeless every year. And when I was working with those kids and I was working with those families, my key takeaway is that I'm no smarter than any of these families. I just had a cop who was my dad, and we had stability in my life. And I was able to grow up and sleep in the same bed every night and know that there's going to be food on the table, and thus I could be successful. So when I think about my community, if you live, near Cleft Corn Elementary on the bougie side of town, which I would consider the south side of town of Lincoln, you are not my problem. I'm thinking about, how do we help families who are struggling connect to the services that they need, connect to the careers that they desire, and then they will never see me again. And that's exactly what all of us are going for. So my community is anyone who needs to maximize their potential and maybe doesn't quite know how.
Awesome. Thanks for providing us that overview, Brian. We'll come back to you in a minute. Beth, same question to you. If you could just describe Diller for us a little bit and your role, both at the Community Foundation Fund and your role, however else you take that to be in your community.
Sure. My community is a rural community. Diller, as you mentioned, is 270 people, basically ag-based. We have a consolidated school district. So we've blended two communities, and that's been a wonderful experience of connectedness of two schools that had previously been rivals. And that's been an experience we've been having for 21 years now, and that's been good for us. We do have a celebration that will be 124 years old this year, and it has helped facilitate connectedness for our community with unspoken expectations of community members. We have a number of entrepreneurial businesses on Main Street, so we have that visionary mindset within the community on our Main Street, within our businesses and within our community. And for me, I am a recently retired educator, and like Brian, hold a passion for children and opportunities and well-being. And I am a volunteer. I am a member of our community foundation and have been since its inception. It's been a joy for me to watch that piece of our community grow and our community evolve through our affiliation with the foundation and other entities such as yours. And I will say, I have never been mistaken for Tom Cruise. So I have never had that experience. Although maybe on the flip side, never for Angelina Jolie. They're probably more like Carol Burnett. That's probably who I would get confused with. So, but that's sort of a snapshot or a thumbnail of Diller and myself.
Great, thanks. And I'll stay with you, Beth, just for a minute.
Sure.
And I would ask, how do you see social connectedness as being important at the work that you've been involved in, either with the school or with the community foundation and getting it started, and to where you see things now?
so much of it is valid because within a community like ours, um, it is more about infrastructure. It's about connecting individuals for personal needs within our county, and sometimes again connecting them with what is within the state. And through this whole process, the ability, I made notes for this, and one of the key things that's important for us is being in a rural community, you have enough committees, organizations, projects, and just social gatherings that it's very likely one person is part of multiple experiences. And building the thought that if I am at a foundation meeting and an idea comes up about a community opportunity, a community need, and then I am for some reason at the town board meeting and something comes up linked, I make a point to make those connections for them and share that. And so in a small community, oftentimes our social connectedness is like connecting the dots of wants and needs to resources or shared interest. And it is by that one-on-one, either intentional or unintentional um, communication of, I was just in a meeting about, we have been very fortunate to be accepted into the Nebraska Community Foundation's hometown intern program. And so in having a meeting with NCF staff about that and some of our own FAC members, the ideas came up from how we might promote things there with the youth survey that we just completed with Christine from NCF. Then the link was, we also became part of the Connecting Elders with Families grant through Nebraska Community Foundation. And in working with the hospital in Fairbury to ensure we continue to provide good health care for our young people in Diller, I realized that the survey data needs to be shared with the hospital board in Fairbury. And so again, it's just appointing, I guess, a person or persons to be the connection that takes this piece of information to the next and thinking that mindset. But I also did make a note to myself, not only about building a caring environment in Diller, but the fact that we need to facilitate that mindset in others so that it isn't just one or two key people who do it naturally, but that each individual realize that they really do carry a powerful opportunity through their multiple affiliations with things.
Yeah, thanks. I want to come back to that, cultivating that mindset, both in yourself and in other people, of having other people in mind as you're going about your work. I want to come back to that for sure. Brian, I'd also ask you the question, what do you see as being sort of at stake in having an environment that's connected, either for the people that you work with, the community that you're serving, and for you, I guess, yourself in the work?
Yeah, so the population of Nebraska is going to decrease for the next 50 years. As baby boomers leave us, baby boomers did not replace themselves. The workforce will decrease, the overall population will decrease over time. That's true statewide, that's true in Lincoln and Omaha. Our workforce is actually projected to go down. So when I think about maximizing potential, I think to myself, how can we have a successful community while we're going to have less people, while at the same time, we're going to see increased automation? So I'm 40. I've been hearing about automation since I was 4 years old watching sci-fi, right? But shit is real now. There's a lot of jobs that are not going to come back from the pandemic. And we already see it. So I have a 6-month-old, which means I go to Walmart. I never went to Walmart before for all the reasons you might think of that I didn't go to Walmart before, but I do now. And what I've seen since the pandemic started is they are consolidating. There are less people working there than there were before, and they're not going to bring it back. They've automated cleaning positions with cleaning robots. They've automated checkout positions with way more automated checkout. So these jobs aren't coming back. So when I think about how does connectedness matter to all this, it's that we are going to have to be very careful that we don't leave people behind, because we already did. And if we're not careful, it's going to get worse. And I don't mean to sound like a Debbie Downer or anything like that, but I always try to think 5 years out. 5 years out, there will be less entry-level jobs in my community. I can only speak to Lincoln, right? There will be less. So how do we do that? How do we connect people to careers where they can pay their rent and they can send their kids to school and, God forbid, a summer camp? So connectedness comes back to knowing how to find jobs, whether that's the American Job Center or straight up, knowing how to connect to resources. That's MyLink, which is our app and website that is available. And then the third thing is it's connectivity to your neighbors. You know, when we do research on how do people find out about jobs, a lot of times it's neighbors, it's word of mouth. People like me are yelling from the rafters about all these different jobs, but the people heard about their job from their neighbor. So how can we tell their neighbor about the better job, not the fast food job? Screw that. The Kawasaki job that pays $18 an hour with full bennies with no previous experience. The Snyder Industries jobs that pays $19 an hour with no previous experience. Or if you want to work from home and do customer service, God bless. Spreetel will pay you $17.25 an hour with full bennies to do customer service from home. But people, if they don't know about those jobs and those opportunities, then they simply don't exist. So that's when I think about connectivity.
Right. So what does that social infrastructure look like then in your community, as far as where you're working, or even just in, you know, what's within reach for you of what groups, places, other connectors? What does that environment look like for you?
It's the world that we create, right? So I take responsibility for that. That's really my job. So I used to serve individuals directly. If Val and her family became homeless, I'll pick on Val because her and I were in another panel last week. It used to be my job to work with her, and now it's not. Now I'm more in kind of a 30,000 foot position. So what we've done in Lincoln over the last 6 years is created Employee Link, Employee LNK, which is a monthly meeting of all the different agencies and nonprofits that focus on workforce. We all get together, we invite employers to hear from us. All the employers get to hear about the agencies, all the agencies get to hear about the employers. And then we send all that information out to a listserv that has 900 people on it, 900 case managers and nonprofit workers. If you work with people in Lincoln, Nebraska, and you are not on my list, you are actively trying not to be. I will take the Pepsi challenge. I'll take the Coke challenge if there is one. So we've really kind of created a really good network in Lincoln to where case managers don't have to cold call businesses. We already have relationships with these businesses. I can tell you who the HR person is. I know who's hiring. We can figure this out together. So what I hope everyone hears is that's a replicable model. There's now Employ Beatrice, Employ Norfolk, Employ North Platte, Employ Kearney, Employ GI, and Employ Omaha. Did Omaha copy us? Of course they did. We're smarter than them, right? That whole equity thing I told you about earlier, that applies to everyone except Omaha. We're smarter than Omaha. So, you know, the bottom line is EmployLink costs $0. There's no money, there is no budget. But we organize every career fair in this town, up to and including drive-through career fairs, veterans career fairs, high school career fairs, adult career fairs. We run all kinds of events with $0 because the agencies and businesses see the value in the connectivity.
Yeah, thanks for the little Omaha smack talk in there as well. But
what would I be doing if I wasn't talking trash on Omaha being in Lincoln? What would I do?
I guess say a little more about how that forming that connection of where you recognize sort of that shared value, where you find that place of common ground in forming those connections.
Yeah, so if you want to piss off employers, there's one easy way, really easy way to piss off the employers in your community. Have all your case managers call them individually. Hey, are you hiring? Hey, are you hiring? Hey, I got a guy. Okay. That makes employers crazy. So there's 10,000 open positions in Lincoln, Nebraska. 10,000 open jobs. There's less than 3,000 people receiving UI. We have more jobs than we have people. One consequence of having no refugees for the last 4 years is that, but that's not it alone. Part of it is simply that businesses are growing. They're not able to fill the jobs. And then what happens? They start to think about automating, right? So what I think about is, how do we really fill the quality jobs so that the jobs that you can't live on, let those get automated. But the jobs that you can make a living on, let's fill those and make sure that we're able to do that. So Daniel, I'm not sure if I answered your question. Did I get close?
Yeah, you got close. Yeah, thanks.
Okay.
And I'll jump over to Beth.
Yeah, I don't mean to talk too much. Beth, what do you think?
Thanks. Yeah, Beth, what similar question to you. What does the social infrastructure in Diller look like? I guess the groups, the places, events where people connect. How do we talk a lot, and I think in the small town world, about culture, and I guess where would you see that culture being formed and stewarded in Diller?
Definitely to look at the foundation and what they've begun to do has made a huge part, or played a huge part, because we started to initiate community surveys, both informal and formally, and that has given people a voice. We also regularly survey our young people, so we've worked with Craig Schroeder through the Heartland Center for Leadership, and recently we worked with Kristen from the Nebraska Community Foundation, giving people a voice for us is a huge connectedness piece. When you're in a rural community, you look at, first of all, what human resources do we have and what infrastructure resources do we have, and then we want to give our community members the opportunity to be visionary, to dream, to think of what the best place could be that they would want to live, and then have a voice to share that. And so for us, connectedness is being that good listener and then good stewards of what we were given for information. And so I think the foundation has been the primary one to develop that kind of connectedness with people, and then demonstrate or model the importance of carrying that forward. I made mention of our youth survey. We are having an event now that COVID restrictions have opened up a bit in the school. We're having a follow-up meeting on April 16th with our high school students who were surveyed last year. So making the point to let them know when we do survey them that their answers were listened to, that we heard what they were saying, and to share with them what action are we taking? What did we hear them tell us? And who else did we share this information to? Daniel, I'm very interested in what you're talking about with the jobs connection, because that was one piece that we have on our to-do list to move forward with our hometown intern, is to really create an easy to access connection for our young people and the jobs and job types that are available within our area that they may not be aware of. And so I think I'll be contacting you to just get some ideas of how you've structured that and what that looks like. So I'm hearing the same sorts of things that Daniel spoke of, but in a maybe a little reversed way, listening instead of the action. I will say that we have really appreciated the large networking model that Daniel alluded to, and making the connections as easy as possible for people on both sides, as you spoke, Daniel, about the employer and the employees. Making things as simple as possible. And our example is would be one case with the staff at NCF and their work, Emily and Jim, in the planned giving program at Nebraska Community Foundation. We regularly reach out to our financial planners and work at staying connected with them and offering their clients the opportunity to make a planned gift to our community to provide that financial infrastructure for the future. And there is no way that we could organize the quality of information, connectedness, resources that they have organized on our behalf. They regularly reach out to the financial planners in our area as well as the entire state, and then they guide us in how to make our own approaches most impactful. So that whole model of working to make the connection system as convenient, easy, high quality is an excellent one. And for a small community, it may not be doable to go make your own as easy, but to certainly look for when you can take advantage of a high quality one that will benefit your own goals.
A question for both of you. One of the main themes that has come up in doing the Civic Health Index this time around is, I guess, in making connection easy is also making it inclusive as well. And so what are some ways that in the networking and in the processes you're infusing it with, a way to connect diversity and inclusion as well, and that it gets outside of maybe a circle of your closest, the people that you're sort of already connected to?
Yeah, so one way that we do that in Lincoln is through MyLink. MyLink is an app and website of all the different nonprofit, city and state, federal services in our community. That tool translates into Arabic, Vietnamese, Spanish, and Somali. Once you download it, it even works offline. You don't need an internet connection. So that's one way that we make sure that all resources and information are shared, no matter your language, and no matter if you have a internet or Wi-Fi connection. I've been saying this for years, but it's still true. Every homeless family I ever worked with had a phone. Every single one. I never in all my time, which is almost 10 years in Lincoln, Nebraska, worked with a family that didn't have a phone. The trick is it just wasn't connected to anything. It's a Wi-Fi device because they can't afford to pay Verizon, but they get prepaid minutes at Boost Mobile or some other, place like that. So the cool thing about MyLink is once you download it, you don't need an internet or a cell phone connection to make that work. So that's the first thing to make sure that we're inclusive. There's two other things that I wanted to mention just briefly on inclusiveness and diversity. One is in manufacturing. So manufacturers in Lincoln recognize that their old white dudes are about to retire, and it's happening. LES, Duncan Aviation, Lincoln Industries, you name it. If it has industries on the end of it, they're looking at a pretty significant retirement cliff if they haven't already taken it on. So what we did is we developed a 6-week, once a week, 2-hour class course to introduce people with no previous experience in manufacturing. We've had 48 graduates, 50% are female, 63 I think are people of color. And now we're getting women into manufacturing, we're getting people of color into manufacturing, and they're telling their friends. So the word of mouth thing, the connectivity piece, getting a person hired is just the beginning. Retention is really the key, and then getting them to tell their friends. So that's been really successful here. If any other communities wanted to talk about the Manufacturing Council, I'd be happy to talk to you about that. It's funded by the companies. It's not a grant. I hate grants. I hate grants so much. Sorry, Jeff Yost. I get businesses to pay for my stuff. That way, I don't have to write Jeff any reports. Know what I'm saying? Sorry, Jeff. I had to get after him. You know, him and his partner KC work together all the time, so I gotta get a blast in there. So then second one is Career Ladder. So I put information about Career Ladder in the chat. Career Ladder is funded by google.org, but I believe we could do this locally even without Google's 0.0 infinity 1% of their budget that they gave to us. Thanks, Google. Do no evil. So basically what they're allowing us to do with their money is we created career pathway documents for professions that we knew our refugees and immigrants came to this country with. But if you have an accounting degree from Iraq, that's not worth anything here. So how can we help people reconnect? So basically what we did is we wrote career pathway documents for accounting, law, healthcare, education, and engineering. It took forever. It was really hard because it's really hard, but we have them ready now. And we're funding case managers across the state to work with refugees and immigrants to begin this path. So the cool thing is that we can meet people where they are and help them go where they want to go. So let's say a Nigerian neurosurgeon wants to be a nurse, right? Because he can do that or she can do that in 18 months, start making 60K instead of making like $9 an hour working the cash register at Goodwill. God bless, we can make that happen. If he wants to go on the crazy road to being a medical doctor again, we can help with that. But the cool thing is we can also show people the steps along the way that can get you into a sustainable career while you're on that path. The reason we know those 5 professions are, the reason why we chose those 5 professions is our New Americans Task Force in Lincoln, pre-COVID, which was 77 years ago, we did a survey and we got over 500 responses of immigrants and refugees in Lincoln in 6 different languages. We translated it all back. It was hell. I got Janelle to do the data analysis for free because, hashtag marriage. But what we found is that 36%, somebody correct me, I think it's 36% of our immigrants and refugees who we polled had a 2 or 4 year degree, but 70% of them weren't using it. Then when we dug a little deeper, those were the professions that people said. So we're basing it on data. We applied to Google and got this money. But the bottom line, the reason why I tell you that whole story here and trying to keep it short, because I want to leave time for questions, anything that I want to talk about is, these are things that we can share. I believe the reason that Google funded us was that we said, we'll work with anyone across the state. This isn't just a Lincoln program. So those career pathways are really pretty true statewide. You would just change it to Northeast Community College, or you would change just a few different things because most of it is really going to be the same statewide. And I put that website in there. And if you don't have my email, I'm happy to provide that too.
Thanks. Feel free at this time, if anybody has a question that you'd like to ask our panelists or something that you'd like to explore, feel free to put it in the chat while we have a few minutes left. While you're thinking of those and putting those in there, I wanted to ask you both also, just what personal habits or mindsets keep you connected, keep you in a space where you're able to be a connector in your community for others? What would you say to, I don't know, a child, someone else to cultivate? You need to cultivate these things, or this is what's worked for me. And Beth, I'll start with you.
Yeah, back to the diversity question within our community. The language barrier is primarily Spanish. And so we do have translations of surveys made in Spanish and distribute through employers and work at making personal connections through the school. One of the biggest categories for us for inclusion is our elderly, because so many of them do not feel comfortable with technology. So especially during the pandemic, we've really learned the importance of phone calls, and we make concerted efforts with people and encourage them through our church and other civic organizations to make that a conscious choice to reach out to individuals for whatever reason may not have connections. Offer, if you are willing and able to provide services, just that personal connection and so forth. For me, the mindset, I mentioned earlier, the unspoken expectation within the community that I really attribute to our community celebration of 124 years as being that expected way of life. And I do realize and make a conscious effort to be that connector of the dots for people, but it is primarily through modeling and through the development of opportunities of our young people to begin to instill that within them. So again, I'll go back to our commitment in our foundation to make young people a focus, their leadership development, giving them a voice, and then organizing and planning opportunities for them to use those skills through projects that we promote through our youth philanthropy grant program, or through a grant that they may want to make to our endowment or a request to our general fund. And I do the same through my church and the work that I do there, and any civic groups that we work on. Right now we're doing park renovation, and through Craig Schroeder's survey work, we have a group of high school students that are going to be active in helping us in part of that renovation project. And so working together, being able to model and mentor and provide those opportunities. So that's how we're doing it in rural Nebraska and Diller.
Great, thanks. Brian, we'll go to you. And also, I love Allison, Dina, you've also put in your own lessons here. Keep learning and connecting to share and connect with others. Be willing to take some risks. I think that's a great lesson as well. So yeah, feel free to share your own tips for staying connected, being a connector in the chat. Brian, what words of wisdom do you have for us on that topic?
You know, I mean, I partially grew up in Garden City, Kansas, out west, and you know, a smaller community has its advantages, and a bigger city has its communities, has its advantages. So, you know, Lincoln, there's over 600 nonprofits in this town. 7 days a week, there's at least 10 places to get free food. There's no reason on God's green earth anyone should be hungry in this town, but it happens. So when I think about, and my link is really trying to get to that, right? But when I think about words of wisdom and being a connector, first of all, I don't think I know much. But second, when people tell me they need something, the very first thing I do is go around to people I trust, say, hey, what do you think about this? One thing I learned really early is that it could already exist and I don't know about it. Maybe it got tried already and maybe it didn't work, but that doesn't mean you can't try again. So I guess my point here is that get as many perspectives as you can, get as diverse as you can, and if everyone says it's a need, then great, run through walls. But the surest way to not be successful is to get one or two people only and expect everyone else to bend to your will. that hardly ever works in community development. You got to have some godlike money to bend people to your will like that, which I haven't had the blessing to have. So when I think about community initiatives that we've done, whether it was suicide prevention signs, whether it was Career Ladder, whether it was MyLink or the Homeless Coalition, you know, we decreased homelessness by 53% over the last 5 years. And it wasn't due to more money. It was due to better coordination between the housing agencies and the outreach agencies. So when I think about it, any tips that I have, amateur that I am, is that build your team, make sure the need is there, then go.
Great.
But
Thanks
I don't know
so
what
much.
other people think. There's a lot of wisdom.
Yeah. A lot of wisdom in the room.
I mean, Amanda can stay on mute, but there's a lot of wisdom in this room.
Funny, Brian. I was about to share a positive story about you, but I'll go back on mute.
Thanks a lot. In the meantime, while we're all building our will bending money reserves, I think that's a great note to end on for connection. So yeah, thanks so much, Brian and Beth, for joining us. Thanks to everybody for joining us. I'm gonna kick it back to Amanda to wrap us up, tell us what we got coming up next. This is a series that we're doing, so stay tuned. Join us next month. Amanda, what do we got?
Yes, so we're doing a series of monthly webinars focused on these 4 pillars of civic health. We're going to stay on social connectedness next month. So that's Tuesday, April 13th, again at noon Central Time. But we're going to be talking about social connectedness across backgrounds. So especially as we talk about diversity, equity, inclusion, especially as we talk about like race equity work. I think this will be a really critical one for all Nebraskans to really consider, ponder, and think about our role in social connectedness across backgrounds. Partially to a point, Allison, you made in the chat of keep open-minded, think about people outside of your comfort zone. So we also have our community self-assessment and discussion guide up on our digital Civic Health Index Interactive. So feel free to download that and use that in your communities. You can focus on social connectedness or anything else. Thanks everybody for coming if you have to hop off. We do have an upcoming Civic Saturday. Steve Smith, our very own Civic seminarian, will be delivering a tremendous civic sermon. That's next Saturday, March 27th. We'll send out a link for all of that. And then, of course, if you simply want to keep on top of civic health news, the index, the monthly webinars, anything else, feel free to hop on that link there. I promise we won't spam you. So. Any final questions as we wrap up for our panelists, for Daniel or I or Steve?
Right.
Okay. Yeah, thank you so much for coming. This has been a tremendous panel. Thank you, Beth and Brian, for sharing your tremendous experience.
Yeah, this was great.
We really appreciate it. Anything else, DB?
Nothing from me. Thanks, everybody. Have a great week.